So the Car Trek series really has blown every other YouTube channel out of the water with just the production value and the way it works. So when Ed actually gave me the opportunity to run with the cars that he was looking for, my head kind of got a bit carried away. And Ed says to me, hey man, we're looking for a TVR and we're looking for something eligible to come into the US, therefore 96 and before. And you know what, up until this point, I'd kind of had a few looks for him and sent him a few pictures, but no car really shouted out, this is the one for Ed. It needs to be kind of on the fence line of good, and kind of on the fence line of appealable, and kind of on the fence line of approachable and usable. So there's a big line there, you know, with, you know, this car looking good and looking pretty, but at the same hand being something special that is Car Trek worthy. So I'm sat there, and basically a couple of weeks beforehand, I had attended a show called Max Power Reunion, which was basically back in the early 2000s. There was this show called Max Power, and if you guys know anything like Tavarish's Pimp My Ride Chrysler Voyager, okay, Pimp My Ride was actually brought over to the United Kingdom and was presented by a guy called Jamie Shaw, who owned a company called Charisma. Charisma basically threw the rulebook out the window, okay? And this, in some opinions, it was blasphemy. It was swearing on, you know, the holy gods of the car world, because, you know, you were bringing 2002 TVR Cerberas, which were like supercars back in the early 2000s, to the Max Power body-kitted, speakered, nitrous oxide tanked cars, which basically upset the world, okay? All I remember of being at that era, I'm 35 now, so, you know, doing the maths is not really within my brain right now, but I remember being outside the front of my house, putting big subwoofers in the back of my mum and dad's cars and playing music as loud as I could. And basically that was the whole idea, to put as many speakers in a normal car as possible, just to upset the purists, really. And this car here was modeled by a lady called Jenny Bruce, and she was the actual picture model for the TVR Cerbera for Max Power back in 2002. And I didn't really realize who she was. I'm pretty sure we've met on quite a few occasions, but not in person. And I'm sure she brought me into the world of scantily clad women, shall we say. Because, you know, looking at that car back in the day, I remember having magnets on that magazine, which basically came in a plastic wrapper. So it's not a pornographic magazine that you can't get off the top shelf and have a little flick through before spending any money. It normally had extras in there to sort of entice you into spending it. So on the back you had basically an A4 sheet full of pop-out magnets from Too Fast, Too Furious and the TVR Cerbera. And Jenny Bruce was the star, which was basically topless and looking very, very good. I mean, if you've got it, flaunt it, and fair enough. These ladies are very, very lucky to have control of their careers, and fair play to them. But you know what? This car was everything to me. This was the epitome of Max Power, and it was everything I've ever dreamed of. A front engine V8 car, rear wheel drive, donut ability. You could be a complete plonker and have your music on full blast, making the world smile at the same time. Does it get any better? Well, not really. Well, actually, it does get a little bit worse for the actual photographers of the day, because when they had the car up on the Maguire stand back at Max Power in the Wembley Stadium, okay, they had to remove the driver's door because the driver's door wouldn't open far enough to get any photos whatsoever. So all of Jamie Shaw's lovely artwork and his 35 speakers that wrap around the dashes and gauges that were completely irrelevant and nitrous tanks which allowed no one to sit in the back of the car were right in the way. So how can they see any of his work? Well, let's just get rid of the door. Well, when the car came to the UK, it was painted gold, you know, because that was about as good as it got. You know, this is the gold car. This represents the most highly valuable, you know, spending in the world. And the car was developed that way. The car disappeared into garages and sheds for 10 to 15 years. And basically, I got a call saying, hey, Max Power Reunion, this car's going to be brought back out on stage and shown off with Jenny Bruce. And I was like, this is absolutely crazy. I turn up, they did an amazing job of representing the car, and Chiro from Petronism Live put the whole event on. Absolutely nailed it, smashed it out the park. Well, I walked away from the event and I got a phone call from Ed saying, hey, you know, keep an eye out for a car for Car Trek. And I was like, oh, I know just the car. But I'm pretty sure the guy spent like 10 to 12,000 pounds, like 15,000 bucks, just getting it to a stage where it could drive to Max Power Reunion. Guys at home, you do not understand just how hard it is to convince a man to buy a car that he doesn't want, need, or have any desire to own, okay? This car does not scream Ed Bolian, okay? Ed Bolian buys cars that are perfect, beautiful, stunning, and that make money. I'm pretty sure this car was not beautiful. It was not stunning. It wasn't going to make money, and I'm pretty sure it was unreliable. But you know what? Ed wants something that's going to make the world smile, and if there's anything this car does, is it makes women, children, elders, even people that don't even like cars smile, because it is so outrageous. It so fits the time period, and it truly is a piece of automotive history that will go down with a smile for the rest of his life. So I spoke to Ed, and we came up with a few ideas, and then basically it came up on eBay the next day, which was a really weird thing. It was like the stars had aligned. I phoned Ed and said, look, I understand this car may not be the sexiest car, it may not be the prettiest car, and it may not be the most original car, but I can assure you, you will break the internet with the most famous TVR on the planet. Ed was enticed, okay? And he gave me a budget, and in hard up garage style, I knocked him right down. And basically in hindsight, it's kind of glad that I did that too, because I jumped in the car, I drove the car, I put the music on. So if any of you guys have seen the Gone in 60 Seconds film back in the early 2000s, to open the door, there was these little poppers in the wheel arches, right? Well, Max Power, they put these little door poppers underneath the mirror. So this car was quite literally amazing, unless you wanted to start it, put fuel in it, or actually use it in any way, shape or form. Because basically it had more switches than an F1 jet. Like, this thing was absolutely mental. To get in the car, you needed a switch. To open the window, there was an array of 4 switches, which basically you either open the door, move the mirror, or open the passenger door before you actually achieve what your first goal was. It makes it brilliant to look at, but you try and get in a car with the windows up, you can't open the doors and you can't open the bonnet where the battery is located. Completely impossible. So what we ended up having to do was remove the front surround at the back of the engine to allow the battery to be obtainable, jam some old socks, sorry Ed, in the back of the door lock so that no one could shut the bonnet, because I didn't want the bonnet to be locked and you not be able to start the car. Well, most people don't realize this, okay? But when the gentleman allowed me to be the custodian of the car for Ed at VINwiki, he gave me the TVR Cerbera page, the Max Power TVR Cerbera page on Facebook and on Instagram. And I'm getting a lot of people and a lot of hate messages saying, why the hell would you take that car out of the country? It's a bit of British history. It's the most famous TVR in the world. Why would you give it to Ed and the gang to smash to pieces and make it worthless? Well, actually, guys, there is no other man on this planet that would go to the lengths and the expertise of putting the money in this car to make it as good as it can be. For me, it drove lovely, but I'm the custodian. I'm not going to rag it around a track or do donuts. It started, it stopped, it did the trick. When it got to the US, this car was waterlogged. The ECUs were moldy. The car was really, really beyond repair. When I peeled off the plasti dip on this car, because everyone's like, why the hell would you paint it orange? No one knows this car was plasti dipped in a really bad way. It was a satin gold that was done over a black plasti dip, and it was the only way they could get that car looking the way it did for the show. When it come to America, it wasn't in a good shape. These rear exhausts, which were replicated of the day, were held in with wood screws. They just fell off. But you know what? Ed did the car justice. He spent thousands upon thousands of pounds that no one in the UK or Europe would have ever done. He would have sat in the corner and been a pretty car from a distance, but no one would have made the car usable. Ed invested money. The guys from Car Trek made this car what it is today. It's not only now the most famous TVR in the UK and Europe, it is the world's most famous TVR, which will always remember the Max Power era. How far and how long it will last for, we'll never know.
Premier Financial Services makes it easier and more affordable than you could possibly imagine to own your dream car. Their Simple Lease is one of the most powerful tools in the world of exotic car financing. You get all the benefits like the tax savings and the low payments of a lease with all the additional benefits that you normally find in a traditional finance arrangement. You can build up equity, you can pay it off early, you can trade in and out of cars because you get a very clear and easy to understand amortization table to understand what your payoff will be any month throughout your term. And all the while, the amazing team from Premier Financial Services will be right there to help you along the way. They've been supporters of the VINwiki channel now for 5 years in a row, so we can't thank them enough for that, but mostly we're thankful for the fact that they can help you make it easier than ever to own your dream car. Check them out now.